Almost done, sir.
Good. Make sure they're perfect.
Yes, sir, they will be.
Hurry up.
Kneel down and clean my shoes, now. Warm coffee slid across the polished leather of Grant Holloway's Italian loafer and dripped onto the cream carpet, leaving a dark stain beneath his foot. This is your fault. Clean it up, you filthy old woman. Sir, I only just walked onto this floor. I don't care where you came from. You ruined my shoes. Clean them. She did not move. Are you deaf or are you just slow? I haven't done anything. His face tightened. A cold smile pulled at one corner of his mouth. Did you just talk back to me? She lifted her chin. For a brief moment, she looked as if she might turn around and leave. Grant stepped closer, close enough for the sharp scent of his expensive cologne to fill the space between them. Clean my shoes. Your contract can disappear before lunch. Try me, old woman. The elderly black woman let out a slow breath, lowered herself onto both knees, and lifted his shoe into her hand. What Grant Holloway did not know was that his career was already beginning to disappear as quietly and completely as the stain she was wiping from his loafer. To understand how a black woman in her mid-60s ended up kneeling in front of him, you need to know one thing. She owned the building, not in a symbolic way, not as a figure of speech. She owned the land beneath it, the steel inside it, the 64 floors of glass rising above downtown Chicago, the brass plaque beside the elevator, and the carpet pressing into her knees. Every inch of it. Her name was Evelyn Josephine Carrington. She was the founder and chief executive officer of Carrington Verity Global Holdings, a firm that managed more than $40 billion in assets. She had built the company from nothing over more than 4 decades. She began with $12,000 from a small business loan, one janitorial contract at a hospital, and a notebook full of names. Most of those names belonged to people who had told her no. A few had said yes. She paid every one of them back with interest, ahead of schedule, then spent the rest of her life proving that trust, discipline, patience, and relentless work could build something stronger than anyone had expected. She still owned the company outright. No outside shareholder could remove her. No board majority could overrule her. There was Evelyn, the founder, and the people she trusted enough to stand beside her. So why was she dressed like a cleaning contractor, on her knees, polishing a man's shoe? Because twice a year, Evelyn disappeared from the executive floor for several days. Officially, the calendar said she was away for strategy meetings. Unofficially, she put on a navy maintenance polo, tied back her silver-gray hair, replaced her platinum earrings with plain studs, and walked through her own building from the lowest service level to the top floor. She called them ghost walks. Her chief of staff called them the most honest audit money could never buy. During those walks, Evelyn watched everything people did when they believed nobody important was paying attention. She noticed who held the elevator, who said good morning, who remembered the names of the night cleaning crew, who left a holiday tip for the people who emptied their trash after everyone else had gone home, who walked past the security desk as though the person behind it were part of the furniture. Most of all, she watched how powerful people treated those who could do nothing for them. Junior employees, interns, receptionists, security guards, cafeteria workers, cleaning staff, contractors, people whose names rarely appeared on meeting invitations, but whose work kept the whole building moving. The badge on Evelyn's chest could open every door in the tower. The navy polo made her invisible to the very people she wanted to study. There was another reason the disguise worked so well. Evelyn Carrington was famously private. Her official portrait hung in the lobby downstairs. In it, she wore pearls, a tailored charcoal suit, and a calm expression that made her look both warm and impossible to intimidate. Many younger employees had only ever seen that portrait. Most had never met her in person. Only a handful of senior insiders knew that she was conducting one of her ghost walks. Everyone else knew the woman on the wall. So to the employees on the executive level, including the man who had ordered her onto her knees, Evelyn was simply an older woman in a maintenance shirt with a mop, a cart, and a badge nobody bothered to read. Early that morning, the executive lounge was beginning to fill. The room was lined with glass. Small eucalyptus arrangements sat on the tables. The espresso machines cost more than some used cars. Pale sunlight rolled across Lake Michigan and spilled through the windows until the water looked like hammered silver. Fresh coffee mixed with the faint floral scent pumped through the lobby air system. Near the espresso bar, a small, dark patch marked the cream carpet. Someone had spilled something the night before. The cleaning crew had missed it. Evelyn had already written a short note in the small leather notebook she carried in her pocket. Check shift handoff. She pushed her cart quietly along the wall, watching who greeted the receptionist and who did not. Then the elevator doors opened. Grant Holloway stepped out. Grant was in his late 30s, white, polished, ambitious, and already a senior vice president of client services. His name was on the short list for the next opening in the executive suite. He wore Italian loafers his wife had given him after a promotion. On his wrist was the expensive watch he had bought himself when whispers first began that he might one day become chief operating officer. He carried himself like a man who believed the morning existed to prepare the world for his arrival. He had just come from another difficult internal review. Once again, human resources had warned him that complaints had been filed about the way he treated people. Once again, he had dismissed them. In his mind, anyone who complained simply was not built for the pace. Then he noticed the stain on the carpet. He noticed the older black woman in the maintenance polo. And in a single unconscious second, he decided what kind of person she was, what she was worth, and what he was allowed to do to her. Beside the elevator, a brass plaque caught the morning light. Beneath the company name, one sentence had been engraved into the metal. "We work for every floor." Grant had passed it countless times. He had never really read it. Now the cloth in Evelyn's hand moved in slow circles over his loafer. The dark leather slowly began to shine. Her knees pressed into cream wool carpet that cost $400 a square yard. The smell of spilled coffee mixed with leather conditioner. "Get the heel." Grant's voice came from above her. "There's still a spot on the heel. You missed it." She moved the cloth to the heel and worked the stain away. "Now buff it. I want to see my face in that toe." She buffed the leather. Grant looked down at the part in her gray hair. Something small and ugly flickered behind his eyes. He liked this. He liked the feeling of standing over someone who had no power to stop him. He shifted his weight and rested his loafer more heavily in her palm, almost as if her hand were a footstool. "Do the other one too. Don't get lazy on me." She moved to the other shoe. The elevator opened again. Camille Reeves stepped into the lounge. Camille was vice president of operations and still relatively new to the executive level. She was the second black executive in the building. She carried a coffee in one hand and a tablet in the other, speaking softly into her wireless earbuds. Then she saw Evelyn on the carpet. She saw Grant standing over her. She saw the maintenance cart against the espresso bar. Her sentence stopped. Her grip tightened around the tablet. "Grant?" Grant turned. The moment he realized he had an audience, his face changed. His expression became wider, lighter, almost theatrical. "Camille, good morning. Small coffee situation. The lady's helping me out." Camille's jaw tightened. She stepped forward. Evelyn lifted her eyes for only a moment. Their gazes met. Evelyn gave the smallest shake of her head. "Not yet." Camille froze. Confusion crossed her face first. Then recognition. Then a restrained fury so sharp she had to physically hold herself still. Camille was an executive, but she also knew what it meant to enter a room where everyone silently measured whether she belonged. She understood that if she confronted Grant in that moment, without context and without support, he would turn the conflict into a question about her judgment. Evelyn's eyes told her to wait, so Camille stepped back. She lowered herself into a leather chair near the window. She did not look at her tablet again. Grant had not noticed the silent exchange. He only noticed that people were watching. And that made him louder. He leaned down toward Evelyn. "You know what my grandmother used to say?" Evelyn kept polishing. She was a wonderful woman, salt of the earth. She used to say there are two kinds of people in this world. A junior analyst near the espresso machine slowly lowered her coffee mug. Her name was Mallory Pierce. She was in her 20s and had only recently received her first promotion. She stared without blinking. Grant continued. "One kind of person finds peace in honest work. Floors, bathrooms, service. There's dignity in that, nothing wrong with that kind of life. My grandmother had a woman who cleaned for her every week. She loved that woman, really loved her." Mallory's fingers tightened around her mug. Grant smiled. "The other kind gets confused, starts thinking they belong in rooms they don't belong in, starts wanting things that aren't theirs, starts complaining about ceilings and pay gaps and whatever phrase people are using this week." He looked directly at the top of Evelyn's head. "It's sad, honestly, because it always ends the same way." He paused. "Stay in your lane, ma'am. Sometimes it's a kindness when somebody tells you the truth." The room became still. The air conditioning hummed behind the glass walls. The espresso machine released a sharp hiss. Somewhere in the lounge, someone gave a nervous laugh, then stopped abruptly when nobody joined in. Evelyn finished polishing the toe of his shoe. She did not look up. Inside her chest, more than 4 decades of work seemed to compress into one quiet point. She thought about her mother, who had cleaned houses for most of her adult life, coming home with an aching back and cracked hands. She thought about the first office Evelyn herself had ever worked from, a converted storage room where she had installed the phone line with her own hands. She thought about how often she had heard versions of Grant's words from men like him, in rooms like this. Words spoken with confidence because the speaker believed the listener had no power. She inhaled slowly, then exhaled. "Yes, sir." That was all she said. She placed the cloth back on the cart. Then she rose carefully, one knee at a time. It took longer to stand than it had taken to kneel. Her right knee cracked softly. She straightened her back and wrapped both hands around the handle of the cart. "Hold on." Grant's voice stopped her again. "I didn't say you were finished." She turned slightly. "I've got a meeting with senior partners. These shoes need a proper polish, not whatever quick job you just did. Stay right here. Don't move." "Sir, I have a route to finish. Your route can wait." He pulled out his phone and began scrolling. "I'm telling you to stay. That's how this works. And if you walk away from that cart before I come back, I'll call whatever contractor sent you. Then I'll have a conversation about quality control. Then I'll find out your name. Then I'll find out who hired you." He looked up. "Are we clear?" "Yes, sir." Camille stood from the leather chair. "Grant, come on. This isn't right." He did not even look at her. "Camille, stay out of it. I'm doing the lady a favor. Some people need honesty about how this floor works. She's a contractor working in this building. You do not get to treat her like this." Grant finally looked over. "And I'm a senior officer of this firm. Are you really going to turn this into a jurisdiction argument in front of her? In front of everybody?" Camille's hand closed around the back of the chair. Her knuckles went pale. She looked toward Evelyn. Again, Evelyn gave the smallest shake of her head. "Not yet." Camille sat down slowly. The leather chair sighed beneath her. Grant turned toward the conference room hallway. Before leaving, he looked back over his shoulder the way someone might check whether a car was still parked where he had left it. "Wait there. Right there. Don't make me come looking for you." Then he disappeared through the glass doors. The room seemed to exhale. Nobody spoke. For several long seconds, Evelyn stood beside her cart in the center of the executive lounge. A strand of gray hair had come loose near her temple. Her hands rested calmly on the mop handle. Mallory Pierce took one step toward her. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She did not know what to say to an older black woman who had just been humiliated in front of a room full of professionals, so she said nothing. She looked down at her coffee. Her face was red. Her hand trembled enough to make the surface of the coffee ripple. A senior partner passed through the lounge, noticed the cart, noticed Evelyn standing alone, registered the scene as unusual, and kept walking. The brass plaque beside the elevator caught the light again. "We work for every floor." Evelyn reached up and tucked the loose strand of hair behind her ear. Her fingers were steady. Her expression was calm. Inside, she was recording everything. Grant Holloway, the coffee, the order to kneel, the words, "Stay in your lane," the laugh from the back of the room, the silence of everyone who watched, Camille's anger, Mallory's shame, every face, every reaction. She slid the small leather notebook from the front pocket of her polo. She opened it and wrote one clean line. G. Holloway, Senior Vice President, Coffee, Knees, Lane. Then she closed the notebook and put it away. Security cameras in the ceiling quietly recorded the entire lounge from multiple angles. Every executive floor had them for insurance, security, and compliance. Evelyn did not yet know that Grant would come back. She did not yet know that the second encounter would be even worse. Sometime later, the spilled coffee had dried into a faint shadow on the carpet. The executive lounge had filled, emptied, and filled again. Evelyn was still beside her cart. She had noticed the receptionist who refilled her water without being asked. She had noticed the senior partner who passed her several times without making eye contact. She had watched sunlight shift across the lake. Then the glass doors opened. Grant returned. "All right, round 2. He dropped into a leather armchair beside the espresso bar. From inside his jacket, he pulled a small tin of leather conditioner and set it on the side table. "Real polish this time, from my own desk. I don't trust whatever cheap product you've got on that cart." He crossed one ankle over the other and lifted his right loafer. Get to it. I want these shining before my meeting. Evelyn walked over. She knelt again. The carpet still held a faint impression from where her knees had been before. She opened the tin. The scent of beeswax and pine rose between them. Grant looked at his phone. Tell me when you're done. And don't talk. She began working the conditioner into the leather. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency. Her face remained still. Then his eyes drifted to the badge hanging from her chest. Give me that. Sir? Your badge. Hand it over. I want to see what company you contract through. Some of these night crews are sloppy. The badge was attached to a retractable clip. Evelyn removed it and placed it on the side table. The front showed her photograph and her real name, Evelyn Carrington, Maintenance Level 3. The badge had been issued by her own security office specifically for the Ghost Walk. Grant picked it up. He glanced at the photograph, then at her face. Then he tossed the badge back onto the table without reading the name. Fine. His gaze shifted to the maintenance cart. What's in the bottom drawer? Open it. Sir, that's personal. Open it, or I call security and they open it for you. Evelyn looked at him. Your choice, he said. She opened the drawer. Inside was a thermos, a worn paperback copy of Letters to a Young Poet, its corners softened from years of use. A small leather notebook with gold initials embossed on the cover, EJC, and a sealed envelope with the Carrington Verity logo. Grant reached straight for the notebook. He picked it up and turned it over in his hands. Monogrammed leather. That's nice. He smiled. Where'd you steal this from? Across the lounge, Camille inhaled sharply. The woman beside her turned at the sound. Camille stood from her chair for the second time. This time, she did not approach Grant. She moved toward the executive elevators with her phone already in her hand. She called Denise Harper, the Chief Human Resources Officer, using the internal line. No secrecy. No hesitation. Grant did not notice. He flipped open Evelyn's notebook. Inside were neat pages of names, observations, and short lines. Mr. Rivera held the door for me. Kind eyes. Ms. Pearson at security knew every new night crew member by name. G. Holloway. Coffee. See attached. Grant barely looked. He saw handwriting and dismissed it as a diary. I'm joking. Relax. Why is everybody so sensitive these days? He snapped the notebook shut and dropped it back into the drawer as casually as if it were a candy wrapper. Then he picked up the paperback, Letters to a Young Poet. He smirked. Cute. Bedtime reading. He tossed it back. Whatever. Look, I'm doing you a favor here. He gestured at Evelyn, the badge on the table, and the open drawer. I'm not reporting the badge problem. I'm not reporting the attitude you've given me. I'm not calling security about suspicious property, but I want this floor spotless before I leave, or we're going to have a conversation with whoever signs your paycheck. Beyond the glass doors, Camille was speaking quickly into her phone. Denise, conference room on this floor, now. Bring Malcolm from security and contact Celeste. Denise tried to ask a question. Camille cut her off. Now. She ended the call and walked back into the lounge. She did not sit. She stood beside the elevator and watched. Grant still was not finished. Actually, you know what? He looked down at his loafers. Take them off. Evelyn's hand stopped. Both shoes. Take them to the men's room. There's a hand dryer in there. Hold the leather beneath it for a while. It should reset the finish. Then, bring them back to me. I'll be in the conference room. He reached into his blazer pocket and pulled out a $5 bill. He held it between two fingers. Get yourself a sandwich downstairs. He smiled. I'm not a monster, am I? Then he released the bill. It fluttered to the carpet and landed near Evelyn's knee. At that exact moment, senior partner Vivian Cole walked through the glass doors. Vivian was in her early 60s, white, silver hair pinned neatly at the back of her head. She had spent more than 3 decades at Carrington Verity. She had known Evelyn personally for most of that time. She had attended Evelyn's daughter's wedding. She saw the $5 bill on the floor. She saw the older woman in the maintenance polo. She saw Grant sitting in the leather chair with one loafer already removed and hanging from his fingers. Vivian stopped. Her briefcase tilted forward in her hand. The color left her face. Grant, what in God's name are you doing? Grant looked up. He did not recognize the danger. He grinned. Vivian, good morning. Relax. The lady is helping me with the stain. We have an understanding. He looked down at Evelyn. Don't we? Evelyn did not answer. She reached for the $5 bill. She held it between her thumb and forefinger for a long second. Then she folded it once. Then again. 2 precise creases. She rose from her knees for the second time, slower than before. The cart handle steadied her as she stood. Her right knee cracked again. Grant's blazer lay across the back of the chair. Evelyn walked over. She slipped the folded bill into the front pocket where a decorative handkerchief might have gone. Then she turned and looked him directly in the eye. "I won't be needing this, sir." It was the first time she had met his gaze for more than a second. For the briefest moment, something inside Grant seemed to drop. Some small instinct told him he had misunderstood the room, that he had missed something important. He covered the feeling with a laugh. "Cute. Real cute, Grandma. Now the shoes. Let's go." He leaned forward and began loosening the second loafer. He did not see the executive elevator doors open behind him. Malcolm Reed stepped out first. Director of Corporate Security, mid-60s, former Federal Bureau of Investigation. He wore a dark suit and the expression of a man who had already seen enough. Denise Harper stepped out behind him, Chief Human Resources Officer, reading glasses in one hand, a manila folder under her arm. Camille joined them without a word. Then Celeste Whitmore stepped out, chair of the board, late 60s, charcoal suit, pearls, the same kind of pearls Evelyn wore in the portrait downstairs. The four of them crossed the lounge together. Grant was still bent over his shoelace. Evelyn stood beside her cart with both hands resting on the handle. The brass plaque beside the elevator caught the light one more time. Everyone in the room understood that something had changed. Everyone except Grant. Malcolm pulled a badge reader from the inside of his jacket. He walked directly to Evelyn. He did not look at Grant. Denise, Camille, Malcolm, and Celeste formed a quiet semicircle around her. "Ma'am," Malcolm said, "are you ready to conclude the walk?" Grant's head snapped up. His loafer slipped from his hand. "I'm sorry?" He stared at them. "The walk? What walk? Who are you people?" Nobody answered him. Malcolm raised the reader. Evelyn's badge was still on the side table where Grant had tossed it. She picked it up, clipped it back onto her lanyard, then held it near the reader. A soft beep sounded. The executive elevator system recalibrated. The display above the doors changed. Chief Executive Officer Floor, 64, access granted. A second display behind the reception desk lit up in pale gold letters. "Welcome, Ms. Carrington. Welcome home." Camille exhaled like a woman who had been holding her breath for years. The receptionist who had refilled Evelyn's water stood so quickly that her chair rolled backward into the wall. She did not even notice. Grant stared at the screen, then read it again. His face seemed to forget how to move. His eyes froze first, then his mouth, then his jaw. Celeste stepped forward. Her voice was calm. "Grant, I'd like to introduce you to the founder, controlling owner, and chief executive officer of Carrington Verity Global Holdings." She paused. "Evelyn Josephine Carrington." Another pause. "I believe you've been speaking with her for quite some time this morning." Grant's voice came out small. "No." Celeste did not smile. "Yes." Evelyn reached to her shoulder and unclipped the maintenance tag from her navy polo. She turned it over. On the back, engraved in small letters, were her name and title. Evelyn J. Carrington, founder. She placed the tag on the side table beside Grant's tin of leather conditioner. Then she spoke without calling him sir. "Mr. Halloway, you may put your shoe back on." She paused. "You're going to need both of them where you're going." Grant did not move. One loafer remained in his hand. The other sat on the carpet. Across the floor, office displays began changing. Strategy screens, welcome boards, executive dashboards. One after another, they shifted to a gold background. Then a portrait appeared. A woman in pearls and a tailored charcoal suit, hair neatly styled, hands folded, a small composed smile. The same face, the same eyes, the same woman. The security system had triggered the portrait when Evelyn rescanned her badge. Grant had walked past that portrait in the lobby almost every day of his career at the company. He had never once looked closely enough to recognize the person in it. Now he looked at the screen, then at Evelyn, then back at the screen. His legs gave out before his pride did. He sat down. "Stand up, Mr. Halloway." Evelyn's voice was quiet. It was also the only sound in the room. Grant stood. "Take your shoes with you." She looked at the loafers. "Those shoes cost more than some members of our night crew take home in a month. They deserve better than the floor." Grant bent down and picked them up, one in each hand. He looked like a man carrying two things he no longer understood. Across the lounge, Vivian Cole slowly lowered herself into the nearest chair. Her hand covered her mouth. Camille was crying silently. So was the receptionist. So was one of the building services employees who had worked in the tower for years. and so was an associate who had looked away earlier because it had felt easier than speaking. Evelyn turned to Celeste. Convene the ethics committee. Main conference room on the chief executive floor. Bring legal. Bring human resources. Bring all available footage from this floor and preserve the records from prior complaints. Celeste nodded. Done. Evelyn turned to Malcolm. Mr. Holloway is not leaving this building on his own terms. Escort him to a holding office. No computer. No phone. No access to any floor. Suspend every credential immediately. Yes, ma'am. Finally, Evelyn looked at Grant. He was still standing with his shoes in his hands. She studied him for one long moment. I'll see you upstairs. Then she turned toward the executive elevator. The doors were already open. Morning light caught the silver in her hair as she stepped inside. The doors closed. Nobody in the lounge moved. Grant stood in the middle of the floor with his loafers in his hands and dozens of eyes on him. Nobody was laughing now. Malcolm did not touch him. He did not need to. He simply turned toward the conference hallway. Grant followed. One hand gripped the loafers. The other opened and closed around nothing. They passed the receptionist. The building services staff. Mallory Pierce. Vivian Cole. Camille Reeves. No one spoke. Grant's reflection broke into fragments across the glass walls as he walked. His hands had begun to shake. I didn't know. Malcolm kept walking. She didn't say who she was. No answer. It was a joke. Silence. I was joking. Malcolm opened the door to a small interior conference room. No window. One table. One chair. He held out his hand. Badge and phone. Grant handed them over. The door closed behind him. It did not need to be locked. There was nowhere in that building where Grant Holloway could hide from what had just happened. Later, the ethics meeting began on the top floor. Evelyn sat at the head of the table. Celeste Whitmore sat to her right. Denise Harper sat to her left. Nolan Price, the general counsel, sat beside Denise. Malcolm stood near the back. Camille sat along one side as a senior witness. Outside counsel appeared on the video wall. Grant sat at the opposite end. His suit jacket was wrinkled. His loafers were now inside a paper bag near his feet. Ms. Carrington, he swallowed. Ms. Carrington, I owe you the deepest apology a person can offer. He struggled for words. I didn't know. If I had known who you were. Evelyn raised one hand. She was still wearing the navy polo. She had not changed clothes. Mr. Holloway. Her voice was gentle. You're telling me you would have treated me with dignity if you had known I was wealthy. The room was silent. That isn't what I meant. It is exactly what you said. Grant tried again. He spoke about stress, long hours, family pressure, the promotion track, a badly judged joke, a difficult morning, a misunderstanding, a personality clash, a culture issue. Each excuse sounded smaller than the last. Denise opened the manila folder. Mr. Holloway, there are 19 documented complaints concerning your conduct over the past several years. She looked directly at him. Some were informal. Many were formal. A significant number came from women, employees of color, and contracted staff. She paused. We are not here because of one bad morning. We are here because this morning gave us direct evidence of a pattern people have been trying to report for years. Nolan slid a single sheet of paper across the table. Immediate suspension without pay pending internal investigation. Conversion to termination for cause upon confirmed findings. Loss of unvested stock options. Forfeiture of severance under the executive ethics agreement you signed when you became senior vice president. Grant read the paper. His face changed as he calculated what it meant. The house, the private school tuition, the boat, his marriage, his reputation, his father, his future. He began to speak. Nolan stopped him. You may sign at the bottom or refuse. Either way, the suspension is already in effect. Grant signed. When he was later escorted through the street-level lobby, 2 uniformed Chicago Police Department officers were waiting near the revolving doors. They were not there to arrest him. They were there to formally receive preserved evidence and witness statements under chain of custody procedure. Grant walked past them with his head down. Outside, a local television reporter and camera crew were already waiting. Sources inside the building had moved quickly. Soon, footage of Grant leaving the tower with a paper bag in his hand appeared on local television. The company released a short public statement. The opening sentence said that a senior executive had been suspended for repeated documented conduct that violated company values. The closing line was the one people repeated for days. The way we treat the person carrying out the trash after everyone else has gone home is the way we actually run this company. Today, we fell below our own standard. Tomorrow, we will not. The statement was signed by Evelyn Josephine Carrington. She wrote it herself. In the days that followed, Denise Harper's team worked beside an outside civil rights firm Evelyn retained immediately. They interviewed current and former employees. Again and again, the same pattern appeared. Grant Holloway had spent years building a climate of contempt toward junior employees of color, women in support positions, contracted workers, and anyone he believed lacked the power to challenge him. Several employees whose departures had been labeled voluntary were found to have been pushed out after conflicts with him. One of them was Nia Crawford. Nia was a black junior associate who had left Carrington Verity months earlier. During her final performance review, Grant had told her that she interviewed better than she performed. She had been the only black woman in her cohort. On every objective measure, she had been one of the strongest performers. But the sentence stayed with her. Words like that often do. Not because they are true, because they are spoken at the exact moment a person is already trying to decide whether the room will ever make space for them. Soon, civil lawsuits were filed. One was brought by Nia. Another came from a group of former contracted cleaning workers who documented years of harassment. Carrington Verity did not defend Grant in either case. The company joined the workers' case in support of its own affected staff. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission opened a formal inquiry. Federal authorities began reviewing evidence related to possible retaliation against people who had complained. The shoe polishing incident was not the entire case. It was the moment that exposed everything behind it. The local report became national news. Major networks followed. Newspapers published opinion columns. Workplace leaders debated the story. A Senate subcommittee on workplace conditions invited Evelyn to testify in Washington. She accepted. Months later, Nia Crawford's civil case settled. The settlement was large enough to support the next chapter of her education and give her financial security. She later donated a significant portion to a nonprofit that helped people facing housing-related legal problems. Evelyn had personally insisted that the settlement reflect not only lost income, but the years of emotional and professional cost that could not be measured on a spreadsheet. The contracted cleaning workers also settled. Each received back wages, damages, and a written apology signed by the company. Grant, in a separate civil rights judgment, was found personally liable. He was ordered to pay damages. He was assigned hundreds of hours of community service at organizations serving low-wage workers. Under a consent decree, he was barred for years from holding an executive officer role at a publicly traded company. Organizations that once celebrated his name quietly removed it. Boards he had served on asked him to step down. His country club revoked his membership. His marriage began to fall apart during the investigation. His wife gave no interviews. Their expensive home was eventually listed for sale. Inside Carrington Verity, Evelyn used the moment to change the company itself. She launched a program called Floor to Floor. From then on, every executive at vice president level and above would spend one full week each year working beside building services staff. Janitorial, security, cafeteria, mailroom. They would wear the uniforms, work the shifts, learn people's names. No cameras, no publicity, no press releases. No stage photographs. The only person allowed to opt out was Evelyn. Her reason was simple. She had already been doing the work for more than 4 decades. Junior staff also received a confidential reporting channel that went directly to the board's ethics committee. Not through a supervisor, not filtered through office politics, not dependent on whether a powerful person liked the complaint. Nia Crawford was offered leadership of a new dignity at work office. The role came with a budget, a team, and a permanent seat at ethics meetings. She took time to think about it. Then she accepted. Months after the incident, Evelyn was invited to speak at the business school program she had once attended at night while building her company. She walked onto the stage wearing pearls and the same tailored charcoal suit from the portrait in the lobby. She stepped behind the podium. She did not begin with a joke. She did not begin by talking about success. Instead, she reached into a small bag at her feet and lifted out a folded navy polo. The same polo. The collar still carried a faint crease where the maintenance badge had been clipped. She held it up. I wore a shirt like this for years before many people believed I belonged anywhere else. The auditorium became still. Some of you in this room may wear something like it before anyone notices what you're capable of. Some of you may answer phones, clean floors, carry boxes, work nights, serve food, or sit in the least important chair in a room full of people who think they matter more than you. She lowered the polo and folded it carefully on the podium. Remember this: the person on the other side of your contempt may be your customer, your boss, your judge, your friend, or simply a human being who deserve better than what you gave them. You will not always know which. She looked across the graduating students and their families. So treat people with dignity before you know what they can do for you. Treat them well before you see their title, before you learn their salary, before someone important walks into the room. Because character is not revealed by how you behave when the powerful are watching. It is revealed by what you do when you believe nobody who matters will ever know. The auditorium stayed quiet for a moment. Then people rose to their feet. Camille Reeves stood in the front row, tears on her face. Nia Crawford stood a few rows behind her. The clip of Evelyn holding the navy polo spread across television, classrooms, corporate training programs, places of worship, and public speeches. People repeated the message in their own words. Respect should never depend on rank. Dignity should never require proof. At the same time, Grant Holloway was working through the community service ordered by the court. He swept floors at a workforce re-entry program on the west side of Chicago. The program was led by a black woman in her 60s. She did not care what title he used to have. She did not care how expensive his old watch had been. She cared whether he arrived on time, whether he listened, whether he treated people with respect, whether he finished the job in front of him. To her, he was not a former executive. He was simply a man with work left to do, and he still had a long way to go. A year later, the executive lounge at Carrington Verity looked almost the same. The carpet had been replaced. The espresso machine was still there. Eucalyptus still sat on the tables. Lake Michigan still turned pale gold in the morning light. But the brass plaque beside the elevator had changed. Beneath the original sentence, "We work for every floor," there was now a second line, "especially the floors we forget to see." The executive elevator opened. Evelyn stepped out. No maintenance polo, charcoal suit, pearls, hair neatly styled. A simple steel watch with an old leather band rested on her wrist. The receptionist who had quietly refilled her water during the ghost walk was now chief of staff for the floor. She and Evelyn walked toward the espresso bar together, discussing a quarterly report and laughing about something the chief of staff's son had said at breakfast. A young analyst stepped aside to let Evelyn pass. She was new to the company and still learning where everything was. "Good morning, Ms. Carrington." Evelyn stopped, turned. "Good morning. What's your name?" "Audrey, ma'am. Audrey Reed." "Reed?" Evelyn smiled. "Any relation to Malcolm Reed in security?" "He's my grandfather." This time, Evelyn's smile reached her eyes. "Tell him his granddaughter has good manners. Then tell him I said that isn't an accident." Audrey nodded. She did not know yet that she would remember that moment for the rest of her career. Evelyn turned back to her chief of staff. They continued walking. Behind them, the brass plaque caught the light. Across the city, at the Workforce Re-Entry Program, Grant Holloway was sweeping the floor of a community center. The building smelled like cleaning solution and old wood. The broom handle had been worn smooth by many hands. Grant arrived on time now. He did not talk much. He no longer wore the wedding ring. The expensive watch was gone. So was the boat. So were many of the people who once laughed at everything he said. The program director still did not care that he had once held an executive title. She did not care that he had once forced a billionaire to polish his shoes. To her, he was a person completing work he had been assigned. A person trying, perhaps slowly, to understand something he should have understood long before. That nobody becomes smaller because their job is less glamorous. Nobody becomes less human because their clothes are cheaper. Nobody deserves humiliation because they cannot immediately fight back. And dignity is not something we grant after we discover a person's net worth. It is not something we offer because someone carries a powerful badge. It is not a reward for fame, credentials, rank, education, family name, influence, or money. Dignity is something we owe people because they are people. That is the whole rule. There is no complicated version. But this story also leaves us with something deeper to think about. Grant's worst mistake was not simply that he failed to recognize Evelyn. His real mistake was that he believed recognition should have mattered. He believed one version of her deserved respect and another version did not. He thought the woman in pearls should be treated with care, while the woman with a mop could be humiliated. But they were the same person all along. And in everyday life, we make smaller versions of that same choice more often than we realize. We choose whether to look someone in the eye, whether to say thank you, whether to speak when a joke crosses a line, whether to step forward when someone is embarrassed, whether to remain silent because silence feels safer. Mallory froze because she did not know what to say. Camille wanted to act, but understood that timing mattered. The receptionist offered a glass of water. Vivian finally asked the question out loud. None of them responded perfectly. Real life rarely gives us perfect moments. What matters is whether we learn to notice, whether we become a little braver the next time, whether we understand that kindness is not weakness and accountability is not cruelty. Sometimes responsibility means speaking. Sometimes it means listening. Sometimes it means admitting that we stayed quiet when we wish we had not. Sometimes it means giving someone another chance to become better without pretending the harm never happened. Forgiveness does not erase consequences. Consequences do not cancel compassion. Both can exist at the same time. Grant still had to face what he had done. Evelyn still had to change the systems that had allowed complaints to sit unanswered. The company still had to apologize. People who had been hurt still deserved repair. And everyone who watched had to decide what they would do differently from then on. That may be the most useful lesson in the whole story. Character is not a performance. It is not the version of ourselves we show in front of people we want to impress. It is what remains when the room is quiet, when no camera seems to be recording, when no powerful person appears to be watching, when the person in front of us has nothing we think we need. That is when our choices become honest. So the next time you see someone being treated like furniture in a room full of important people, remember Evelyn, remember the mop, remember the notebook, remember the people who looked away, and remember the people who finally found the courage to act. You do not need a badge that opens the top floor to make a difference. Sometimes all you need is the willingness to say, "This isn't right." Sometimes you only need to hold the door, learn a name, offer respect before it is requested, speak gently, listen carefully. Choose not to laugh when cruelty is disguised as humor. And when you make a mistake, take responsibility before someone forces you to. At the end of the day, the question is not whether an important person saw what you did. The question is whether you can live peacefully with the person you were when you thought nobody important was watching, because someone always is. Sometimes it is a camera. Sometimes it is a witness. Sometimes it is a woman in a maintenance polo with a notebook in her pocket and more than 4 decades of memory behind her eyes. And sometimes it is simply you, alone with your own reflection, deciding what kind of person you want to be tomorrow. So here is the question I want you to think about honestly. When was the last time you saw someone being treated badly and stayed quiet? What did that silence cost? And what might it have cost to step in? Share your answer in the comments. Not the polite answer, the honest one. And if this story reached something real inside you, like the video, share it with someone who may need to hear it, and subscribe to the channel. Because the stories that stay with us are not always about powerful people. Sometimes they are about ordinary choices. A door held open, a voice raised at the right moment, a person seen instead of ignored, a mistake faced instead of denied, a second chance used wisely. Act with decency even when nobody important seems to be watching. Because the truth is, someone always is. Maybe a camera, maybe a witness, maybe only the person looking back at you in the mirror tonight. Character is not a performance. It is who you are in the quiet moments,